This is the CreaseCast. Here's your host, Lach in the Crease.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the CreaseCast. Official first episode of the Canucks off season. Hockey's still going. And of course, as per usual, football season has just started right as the Canucks are ending their year. As it one does. I guess technically, here's the thing. I know very little about football, like nothing. I don't watch a lot of, as I readjust my chair, I don't watch football. I've never been all that interested in it. I'm sure this will get me some hate mail, but I think it's boring as hell. No, I mean, but I you know what? I will say this. In recent years, I have gotten more interested in football. Not as a sport that I will ever pay full attention to, but I will say this: there was a YouTuber I've been watching, or is a YouTuber I watch. He's a bit of a acquired taste. He's not for everybody, but this is the guy I found, which is by the name of Urinating Tree. Great name, right? And every week during the last couple seasons, he does like a weekly NFL update video. And again, I don't watch football at all, but I found myself like super into these videos. Like I learned so much more than I've ever known about the NFL through just watching his This Week in Sports Ball videos on the NFL season. And I found it interesting. Like over time, I was like, oh, this is like I actually kind of got into that. Like I don't watch any of the other games. I don't watch any games. I don't want maybe I'll turn on a game or something like in the background, like while I'm working on something else, just as noise. But I never watch. I never watch the games, actively watch. But those videos really got me into did get me interested in actually keeping up with it. So this year I'm thinking maybe I'll look into it a little bit more. Especially because, the 49ers did so well last year. I lived in 49er country for a while. They were an interesting bunch when Colin Kaepernick was QBing, went on his torrid pace that one first season. I mean, he's still a great quarterback, and it sucks that he's out of the NFL right now for, let's be honest, bullshit reasons. Complete bullshit reasons. He should be still he should still be in the NFL. That was an interesting team back then, that 49ers group. They went on a little bit of a heater there. That was cool. I remember watching them, and apparently a good amount of people in Vancouver are 49ers people, because if you're not pulling for the Seahawks, who are obviously the closest team by a country mile, who else are you going to root for? There are not many other options. And I'm guessing most people, if they don't want to go to Seattle, they just go right for the arch rival, which is San Francisco, and the 49ers, who are just the closest after that. I will say I've noticed there are teams the Bills got I think a good amount of attention in Canada just because they played a couple games in Toronto here or there. But I guess that's one of the cool things about living in Vancouver is that because we don't have an NFL team and never will. I don't think that's a hot take to say. You get an interesting crop of people who all cheer for different teams that they might have who they have a little family connection to it, or just none at all, and they just pick them because they like them. I've seen people who are I've seen Cleveland Browns fans, which ouch. I see a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers fans. They seem to be I know a lot of people, especially in Vancouver, who love the Pittsburgh Steelers for some reason. I don't know what. I don't think any of them, the people who I know, have any Pittsburgh connection whatsoever, but they like that team for some reason. And I'm like, okay, interesting. It's cool that we get that here. It's not like with there was the whole thing with the Raptors, people who are the Raptors, how dare, they're not Canada's team, get out of here. What reasonable Vancouverite would cheer for a Toronto team? Gross. To which that I say, as somebody who cheers for the Raptors, it doesn't really matter. You can cheer for whoever the hell you want. Who cares? If they want to cheer for them because they're the only Canadian team left, that's not on you to say that's a bad call. Who cares? Like, I mean, there was like the argument that no real Vancouver Grizzlies fan would cheer for the Toronto Raptors. And as somebody, again, I'm somebody who cheered for the Grizzlies, even though I was a little kid. I remember having my Mike Bibby jersey. We've talked about this on the show. I had my Mike Bibby number 10 jersey when I was a little kid. My mom used to take me to games in like literally wearing a tiny baby bear costume because of the Grizzlies. Like, that was a thing for me. And I cheer for the Raptors now. I lived in the Bay Area during the Warriors dynasty era, basically the entire time, but I was still always a Raptors fan. The Raptors were always number one because I liked the Canadian aspect of it. And also the Sonics are gone. And why am I going to cheer for the OKC Thunder? Gross. And let's be honest, the Raptors name is cool. The logo kick ass. And they're a fun team. And I cheered for the Raptors, and I cheered for them way before. I remember way before they started getting really good. I was a Raptors fan. Like, let me preface by saying I'm not a diehard Raptors fan. Like, I like them, and I will watch their games when they're on. When they're on, if there's no hockey on, I will watch Raptors games. I'm not a diehard. Let's put it that way. But I like the Raptors, and I've liked the Raptors since long before they were good. I went to one of the, I think the last basketball game I've ever gone to was a Sacramento Kings game in 2000 and I want to say not 10 or 9. I don't even remember when it was. It was that long ago. And it was a Raptors Sacramento Kings game at the really old, really sad old Kings arena that they used to play in. That was bad building, terrible building. And Chris Bosh, was Chris Bosh still on the team? It must have been. Chris Bosh must have still been on that team at that point. Because, yeah, I think Chris Bosh played. That's the thing. I don't remember. But I remember I was cheering for the Raptors in that game. And I think they won. I think the Raptors won because they were still okay at this point. Yeah, I think this was a Bosh year. I think this was the year right before he went to Miami. I liked the Raptors since then, and I cheered for them as they got better and better, and it was more fun to watch them play. And right up to Kawhi Leonard, and next year when they get Giannis Antetokounmpo, I like basketball now because of that. So with football, I think I'm gonna try and get more interested. Maybe this is a thing for you who are listening. If you watch football, I like this. I will say I like the Seahawks colors. I like the Seahawks as a team. And I do like the 49ers as well. It was quite funny when I lived in Petaluma, Northern California, and people would say, "Who's your favorite football team?" Just again, because I don't watch. I just to kind of fuck with them. I would be like, "Oh, I have two favorite teams. I like the Niners and the Seahawks because they're better rivals." And people would get so mad. Here's the thing: I am open to picking a weird team or an interesting team. So if you hear. Maybe this is a thing for you guys to like submit. Maybe we'll do this on like the Patreon or something. People can like submit like their arguments for why I should pick this team to cheer for. Present me your teams. Who do you like? And maybe I'll pick one of them to cheer for. Why I would like them. Bonus points for teams with cool logos and cool names. So sorry, Cleveland, you're already kind of out. And teams, who aren't necessarily like dynasties. Like I'm not big into they've won 1,000 times before teams. Like, don't give me New England. I'm absolutely not, that's not going to happen. But like, yeah, teams with interesting logos, history, names, those are the stuff that I'm interested in. I don't care about the players. I don't know any of them. So present me with the cool, interesting, with the really cool franchise stuff, like just where their names and their history and crazy things about that. I like Buffalo a little bit because the Bills are kind of interesting. They lost 4 Super Bowls in a row, something crazy like that. That's the sort of stuff that I'm looking for. So, yeah, hop to that, I guess. But obviously that's enough football talk for this hockey show. Let's talk about the fact that the Canucks have come back. The season is done. Everybody's gone home, except for Jacob Markstrom, who I think was at Sam Gagner's house for a little bit in the summer before going back to Sweden. Because, again, we don't know when we're going to see these guys again. Obviously, Jacob Markstrom is the big question, is one of the big questions. Tyler Toffoli is one. Toffoli did say he'd be interested in coming back. Now, obviously, I always take that with a grain of salt because like what player is going to be like, oh, screw this place, I'm getting out of here, right? Like no, I don't think anybody has ever said that in their entire, has ever said that in their like exit interviews, like, I hate it here, get me out of here, unless they're like, already 100%, getting traded or something, right? Like, clearly he's open to the idea of signing here. It's just a matter of, it might take a lot of money to do that. He's not going to say that, though. With Tyler Toffoli, it is, they're obviously, again, in a tough spot. We talked a little bit about their cap space before. And the cap's been an interesting topic of discussion because everything with COVID. We're coming into a year with a flat cap. But the Canucks, as far as this year is concerned, theoretically, are in an okay situation. Like, in the fact of, like, okay, no, they're in cap hell. Yes, they're in cap hell, but the players who are going to command a lot of salary in the next couple seasons aren't there yet. So now is the time for the Canucks to kind of look at the rest of their players and say, well, okay, this is our chance to kind of go all in and spend some big money for spend a lot of money on 1 year before we have to give crazy big expensive contracts to Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, because that's where they are right now. The Canucks could theoretically, if they can get rid of some of their more hefty, expensive long-term contracts, are in a position where they could theoretically build a pretty damn good team next year. But again, that takes probably some sacrifice, specifically taking a loss on a couple of trades in the long term because you want to go all in this year. It's always a risk. There is a lot of risk involved with any sort of all-in run that any team will tell you. But obviously, if it's successful, who cares? You won. Maybe that second round pick turned into an all-star player for the team you traded that pick to. But if you win the cup, it doesn't matter because you got exactly what you wanted. So with that in mind, I mean, the Canucks are projected to have about $14 million in cap space before re-signing anybody. That's not a lot. That would be theoretically just looking at some of the players who are coming up off the books right now. Just one, two, there are six. There are 9, 10. We'll say we'll kick out Louis Domingue here. There are 10 players. There are 10 players, $14 million. That's not exactly enough to keep them all. There is clearly not enough money to keep them all because I don't think they're all going to sign $1 million for less than $1.5 million. They're not going to. So you gotta kind of look and make tough decisions here, and you got to move out guys on term. Toffoli is the big question here because Toffoli and Markstrom are the two biggest questions, because you could make great arguments for why you should keep both and why it should not be why it's absolutely necessary to keep them both. But those are both tough arguments to make when you only have $14 million in cap space, and quite likely you will end up using all of that. That $14 million is probably what it's going to cost alone just for those two players. I think Tyler Toffoli's last contract he made, I think he made $6 million, and he's probably going to get more than that. Yeah, well, he would have gotten more than that if the pandemic hadn't set in. Now it's a bit more of a mystery, because he's coming off a good year. He's coming off, but again, he commanded quite a bit of money. If I can find his contract, where is it? Oh man, he was only making $4.6 million. Damn, that was a good contract for a guy who won a Stanley Cup with the Kings. Good Lord, they really gave. That was a good deal. Well, you're not going to get that again. He's probably going to get closer to, I would say, probably $5-6 million, probably. Again, pandemic throws that all into whack, but he's going to get more than he cost the last time, which was 4.6. So let's just even say conservatively, he only gets offered $5 million. That's the most expensive contract anyone's willing to offer him, is $5 million per season. That still puts him that still puts him in one of the more higher paid players on forwards on the Canucks. And that takes you already down to about $9 million. Like $9 million left to sign a bunch more guys, to sign a bunch more players. And, with Brock Boeser, they've already got Brock Boeser under contract, who's your number one winger on the lotto line there. It becomes a question of, okay, theoretically, they should be able to keep both, but they have so many bad contracts that is going to be easier said than done, and it's going to take a loss to make that space. Because again, when this whole conversation came up, like before the season returned, there was the whole thing of the Canucks had explored the idea of trading Brock Boeser, and how they at one point they favored Tyler Toffoli just in the short time he had been there over why am I blanking? Over Brock Boeser. Why am I blanking here? There was already a talk of which do you keep? Like people were talking about which players do you keep do you keep Brock or do you keep Tyler Toffoli? Now, and as I said at that time, the fact that we even have to have the conversation of who do you keep is already means something's wrong, because most teams can keep both players without it wouldn't be a question. They would say, they wouldn't even say, who do we choose? They would immediately go, yes, we're keeping both right now because we need them both. And good teams have two players of Tyler Toffoli and Brock Boeser's caliber already on the roster because they manage the cap properly. The only reason the Canucks can't do that is because right now their cap is in trouble. So what you got to do here is you got to look at contracts that might be at a premium right now. Specifically, the fact that the Canucks are coming into a situation where, because they did pretty damn well in the playoffs, like better than people expected, theoretically right now, the stock on some of their players is a lot higher than it used to be. And like the big names that are popping out here are, like, the big one is Brandon Sutter. Brandon Sutter is a guy who, he didn't get a lot of playoff points or anything. He didn't go on some magic run and just score a bunch and just all of a sudden rack up a ton of playoff points, but he was serviceable. He played very well he played pretty well in the time he was given. And again, because the team as a whole succeeded, it makes his stock bump up a little bit too. So right now, you look at that close to about $4.5 million that he's making, and you're saying, well, if we are close to $5 million, $4.5 million that he's making, and you say, well, he's 31, you're not going to re-sign him next year, so he's going to be gone by next season anyway. But if we want to keep players for this year, we need to move him. And if you're lucky, you can find a couple teams to maybe offload him offload him, because you're probably not going to get rid of Jay Beagle. That contract's tough to move. But you can probably move Brandon Sutter even with his modified no trade clause. This is the kind of stuff that the Canucks need to start looking at is, again, likely a Brandon Sutter trade is not going to be a winning one for the Canucks, because I don't think you're going to find any team that's like, we will pay through the nose to get him, or we'll pay any amount, name your price for him, right? So you have to look, more likely it's going to be a case of, we will throw you a draft pick. Please just send us a roster player back, and we will give you Brandon Sutter in this relatively high draft pick just to get him in exchange for your cheap roster player, just to get that money off the books, sort of thing. That's probably the way it's going to look. I don't know where Brandon Sutter would fit necessarily on it, like what other teams he would fit on, but that's what you're looking at. And it's coming up quick. I mean, they're gonna. I think the first week of October is when we get things going in free agency and everything. So you're gonna have to start making those tough decisions now and trying to maybe move some guys before we even get there, because once free agency opens, people are gonna start filling those spaces a lot quicker. I think you got to look at, obviously, Brandon Sutter is a big one you got to get rid of. Sven Baertschi probably as well, because his contract is quite big, is quite hefty as well, even if it is for, again, one more season. You look at guys like maybe you end up looking at, like, you try and maybe move like a Jay Beagle if you can, but that one, again, a tougher sell because he still has 2 more years. And then you go down the list of even to guys like you look at Jordy Ben. You even end up looking probably at Jordy Ben, or you look at moving the rights to players, the RFA rights to other guys. Like Jake Virtanen is a big one, because you're probably not bringing him back anyway. There was the big thing where Benning was quoted as saying he expected more from Jake Virtanen, and the Canucks need more an upgrade on Jake Virtanen. Again, you're probably not going to get a lot for him. If the best thing the Canucks can do with Jake Virtanen is hopefully find a team that's also struggling with a prospect to develop a player, maybe for a different reason, and try and maybe see, okay, can we swap project players here, even if the Canucks need somebody who can help them a little bit right this minute. That's what we're looking at here. You got to start getting very creative about filling these roles and finding players to keep and finding players to move on from, because like Louis Eriksson is another big one, but that one's a very tough sell because, again, he didn't play much. He didn't play much during the playoffs. His stock is probably at about the same, if not a little lower, because he was scratched for so many games during the postseason. I think, there was even talk, of course, that the Canucks weren't even going to be a cap team coming up next year. Although Elliot Friedman reported during Saturday headlines, I think last night, that this is from a Brendan Batchelor tweet as well, that the Canucks will be a cap team next season. Because there was talk that, with the pandemic causing so much and losing a good amount of money off of that maybe, that maybe they weren't going to spend all the way up to the cap, which would have been bad for a lot of reasons. That's a lot. In a way, that's a lost year. But there was one thing that did come out of that, which was that there were rumors that the Canucks were going to make a bigger, more conscious effort to target cheap depth players to fill a year or two, guys who weren't going to cost more than maybe more than a couple $1 million. And when I heard that, I was thinking, forget the fact that they might not even be a cap team. Where has this mentality been for the last couple years? Why was this not already the plan? I love this. Do that, please. You absolutely should be targeting more players who come on cheap depth deals, on those cheap deals, even if that means you're maybe you're not going to get the experience, or you might not get the outright, you're not going to get the name brand or the name recognition, which is, I think, the problem with the Canucks. Sometimes they go shopping for names versus the actual needs of the roster. Is they should be looking for these guys who are going to be, who might sprout, who might, you bring them in on a cheap deal, they might surprise you and just and flourish in Vancouver, kind of like in the way that they, not to the same extent, but like Tanner Pearson was a guy who was, when they bought him at his lowest point, and he ended up having a career season in Vancouver this year. This is the kind of things that the Canucks need to be looking for. Will they all hit? No, but if even a couple of them hit, that's great, and that helps the Canucks at least in the short term. And then next year you reassess. This is why I like the Tim Schaller contract when it was signed, because it was only 2 years. It was only a 2-year deal. He didn't work out in Vancouver, but I am still liked that signing, and I still like that signing to this day because of what it was. It wasn't we're going to invest a bunch of money in a guy who we're going to invest a bunch of long-term money in this guy and expect him to do big things for us. It was, we're going to give 2 years. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's not a huge loss, which is the right way that they should be approaching things right now, because the guys who are going to hit for you long-term, like Petey and Quinn Hughes, are the guys that you want to invest that money you're saving in. That's the way they should be looking at this. Because that at the end of the day, that's what's going to win you. What's going to win next season. Next season, it's going to be a matter of which teams can manage the cap best. It's going to be, that's how this next year is going to play out. Maybe the year after that, because even that might be a flat cap season as well. It's really going to come down to which NHL teams can manage their cap in the best way. And the Canucks are already looking at a little bit of issues because they paid out a lot of playoff bonuses and a lot of other things. So this is the sink or swim year for management team, because, if you don't manage the cap well and your team suffers because of it, that's bad. That's bad on you. And that's maybe you didn't see a pandemic coming, but you should have still be prepared for the idea of things might go wrong, and you have to be ready to take action and be able to retool your team around different situations. Now here's the other thing. First of all, like if you listen to Canucks Conversation with friends of the show, Quads in Favor, they talked to Kevin Woodley from In Goal Magazine, who I love, about goaltending, especially everything to do with Demko and Markstrom and where they're going in the future. And one of the things that Kevin Woodley talked about is that Ian is of course goaltending coach Ian Clark, who's a great coach. He's done like so much with Markstrom and Demko in the last few years. It's completely changed, like not changed the way they play, I guess, but like he has made them that much better than they once were. But he made the note in that episode, which you should go listen to, is that, the new GM of the Panthers, Bill Zito, guy by the name of Bill Zito, was I believe the assistant GM in Columbus when Ian Clark was the goalie coach for the Blue Jackets, specifically for Sergei Bobrovsky. And when Bobrovsky was at his best, when Ian Clark was his coach. Now, Zito is in Florida as the GM there, and Bobrovsky is also in Florida, struggling with a very boat anchor contract that they need to work. So, and Ian Clark also happens to have a home, I guess, like a summer home in Florida. Ian Clark is coming up also on a contract year next season. After next season, his contract with the Canucks is up. So, and we've talked about cap and everything. Here's the thing, and I've said this on Twitter: coaches do not count against the cap. You can pay coaches as much as you like. So if the Canucks want to invest big money, a great way to do that is to pay Ian Clark. There is, this is one of the things I think sometimes we forget a little bit, is that there's no limit to how many coaches or people you can get in you can bring into your management and your coaching staff. You can hire as many people as you want, and it's not going to affect your cap or anything to that regard. So the Canucks would be a travesty if they lost Ian Clark, to a team like Florida, because they weren't going to pay him, because they weren't going to give him a payday or a big pay raise. So if I'm Vancouver, this is this might be your big free agent, your big contract extension to talk about as well, is give Ian Clark a blank check, basically. That what he has done with Demko and with Markstrom has been fantastic, and whatever is going to happen in the future with the goaltenders he's going to be heavily involved in. It's already been talked about that he's probably going to have a say in whether or not Markstrom comes back, and at what price, and at what point do you just go to Thatcher Demko, and can Demko hold his own? He's going to have a say in that because he knows better. He knows best. And he's done exceptional work with this group, with this crop of goalies. So if you're going to want to trust Ian Clark on that sort of stuff, and in the future, it's the best way to handle this. You can give Ian Clark as much money as he wants, because it's not going to affect you. It's going to only make you better. The Canucks would be crazy not to give him whatever he wants, which is probably not, I'm probably not helping their negotiating point here. But again, who cares? Your cap space. There is no cap for coaches. Pay him whatever he wants, because he's done such great work with this group that I don't want to see him. If they lose Ian Clark, I don't think it's going to necessarily completely shatter Thatcher Demko's future, or Markstrom's future for that matter. But it's going to hurt. It is going to hurt, and it will have an effect. And I think if the Canucks are smart, they'll give Ian Clark a payday, because you don't want to lose him. This is the guy that you should be absolutely saying, we need to prioritize keeping this guy for as long as he wants, because clearly he works wonders with our goaltending, and we're going to have guys who need to back up Thatcher Demko at some points, or Markstrom, depending on how this goes. And we're going to need to be ready for that. We're going to need to have a guy who's ready to take those goalies to the next step. So please, Canucks, sign Ian Clark. Do it. And also while we're talking about Canucks Convo, congrats to them on their 100th episode. I think, did I already talk about that in the last one? I forget. Maybe I did. It's been a bit of a while since I've done an episode at all. Into just general NHL stuff. Speaking of goaltenders, I mean, there was talk that Robin Lehner and the Knights had already agreed to a 5-year, $25 million contract extension that was going to kick in after the playoffs. Lehner was asked about it on a Zoom call, and he straight up said it's not true. Uh, his quote was, again, I've been on a lot of teams lately, and you have some talk kind of where you're at, what you want to do. Nothing has been finalized. We're here. It's kind of annoying. We're here in the conference final, and people are saying things they don't know and just adding on to this thing that's been going on here. It would have been finalized if it would have been finalized, but it's not. I'm here to win a cup, not discuss this stuff, because he says what's on his mind. I do think he's kind of like bluffing here a little bit. I think there's probably I think when there's smoke, there's fire. I think he's probably has that contract extension ready to go. Because the whole reason it hasn't been signed is not because it's not because it's not true necessarily. It's more likely because they can't. They have to wait until the end of the season to officially, I think, extend him or something. I think there are rules on that. Until they're officially done for the year. If Lehner's is signing, I think it's likely that he's signing. That sets also the pace for Markstrom's contract. Might help the Canucks a little bit in their negotiating because, if it is a $5 million cap hit per year, that's kind of low. That's a pretty low. And Lehner was the other big name that was going to be in this goaltending class, I would say. Him and Markstrom and Lehner were going to be they were going to set the market more or less because they're the big name. They're the big names and the best goaltenders available. If Lehner is indeed locked up at a cap hit of $5 million for the next 5 years, that's relatively low. That's a relatively low hit. And especially because, again, I think, there was the Bobrovsky thing last year where they gave him $10 million. They gave him over $10 million for the max amount of years, and he was not good. I think that very rightfully scared a few teams into, okay, we're not going to give that much money to guys, especially goaltenders, because goaltending is important, but it does not fix everything. If that's a cut, this is a cut in half. Literally, this is half what Bobrovsky is making at least. I think Markstrom is going to get more than $5 million, but is going to get more than $5 million a year. But again, that's probably not a whole lot more because, again, teams don't have a lot of space to work with. So if the Canucks do want to bring him back on a short-term deal that is heavy on the money for the next couple years, they might, if this is indeed ends up being true, turns out to be true, this contract ends up being signed, they might be in a position where they can offer Markstrom maybe $7 or $8 million for 2 seasons, and call that just to keep him in the team for another couple years while they compete, and then either lose him at the expansion draft or just not re-sign the next time. That hopefully, again, there's still a lot to be sorted out with that, but I would love to see Markstrom back in a Canucks uniform again. Obviously, I like both goaltenders. It's really, I can't pick between them. It's probably again, from an asset management standpoint, yeah, it's probably you don't want to give Markstrom more than 2 years. That's too much. They shouldn't. But if you can get him for 2 years at a good amount, even if it is for a lot of money, if you can get him for 2 years, that's fine by me. That's a good worthwhile contract. But hopefully, maybe hopefully this does turn out to be true, because I would love to see Markstrom come back, even though he does probably, I would say, as much. I also love Markstrom in himself, and I want to see the guy get paid, regardless of where that is. I want to see him get his due and his pay. The Lightning lead the Islanders. Lead the Islanders 3-1. The Islanders did come back with a pretty gutsy win in game 3. But then the Lightning once again took over in the game today. Of course, and then there's Dallas and Vegas. Robin Lehner, unfortunately, has not had the best. The team in front of him has not had the best luck during this series. Anton Khudobin has just shut the door on them. They've been getting Demco'd. That's the big thing, is that Pete DeBoer talked about how they've been getting Demko style performances in front of, they've been playing against Demko style performances with Anton Khudobin in net. And of course now everybody's saying, oh, they got Demco'd, and I love that so much so that I submitted it to Urban Dictionary. It is now up there. You can go check it out. But I love this new phrase of Demko when a team loses because the other goaltender was just too good. I will say these two playoff conference finals have been, they've been a little bit of a slog fest. I'm not having, maybe it's just because the Canucks are out and I'm sad about that, but I've not been having as much fun. Like, I've just been kind of passively watching. There's also just been a lot of hockey in the last month or so, the last month and a half. There's been a lot of hockey. I might be a little bit gassed from that, but these games, let's be honest, the hockey itself has not been fantastic because you do have two very offensively charged teams in Vegas and Tampa, but they're playing against shut-down opponents that are just really good at locking it up defensively and making for just an absolute slog fest of a game in Dallas and the Islanders. Thankfully, in one of those series, the Lightning seem to be finding a way through and breaking through with the Islanders, and now they're one win away from finishing that series off. Dallas is still very good at scoring offense. They've still done quite a decent job offensively, but the Knights have been atrocious. I think they only have, was it 3 goals at even strength or something? It's something very, very low. But the goaltender, again, Anton Khudobin has been very good, and it is amazing seeing what he's done and how far he's gone with this group, especially because Ben Bishop is out, and that could have very easily, completely torched their season. Let's see, the Knights had the 1 goal, they had the 3 goals, and they've had 6 goals. They haven't been terrible. Let's see, power play goal. One's a power play goal. One is even strength. Is the other one even strength as well, or is it's a power play goal? Okay, here's where the mess comes in. They had the 1 even strength goal in the first game, and then in 2 of their games they've had only 3 even strength goals in this whole series so far. It's not a lot. It's not enough. It's clearly not enough. Anton Khudobin has been fantastic. He had 32 saves in the last game, and Dallas again has done a very good job at just not giving them great lanes to look at, but they also look a little bit just rattled. They look rattled. They look like a team that got affected by Thatcher Demko standing on top of his head and not giving up anything. The Knights look a little shell-shocked. I think they might be. I'm not going to count them out because they could very easily turn on a dime in the next game and just come out just blazing with goals. And because again, they've also just been getting a little bit of not great puck luck as well. But I think Dallas is going to lock this series up, and it'd be good to see because I don't want Vegas to go any farther. And again, I love Anton Khudobin. I really want to see him get his chance at a cup final, even if it will be against Tampa, which I think Tampa's that one team that I think can very easily is just too loaded and will overwhelm the best defensive teams. You're seeing it with the Islanders. It looked like the Islanders were maybe going to climb back into this thing during the game today, and then the Tampa answered back with a couple of big goals in their own, which in the second period, just right after the Islanders took the first lead of the game. Semyon Varlamov looked a little bit sloppy on both of those goals. That ended up, and then there was the insurance goal in the third period. I think this comes down to just another case. I think this comes down to a case of, you're seeing very good goaltending groups. Like you're seeing Andrei Vasilevsky versus Semyon Varlamov and Thomas Greiss, 2 guys who I think have played over their heads and have been have a good goaltending coach. Again, goaltending coaches, man, they do great things. Vasilevsky is pure talent. And I think, and so are the Lightning players in front of him, and a much more stacked team offensively than the Islanders have. Yes, they have Matt Barzal, but that's and a couple players like Jordan Eberle and Anthony Beauvillier who contribute and chip in offensively, but that's kind of it. They have a very short amount. They've won by getting contributions from all across their lineup, but they can't match that with a team like Tampa right now. They just don't have the horses for it. And I think right now, again, with Vasilevsky, you're seeing a guy who's pure talent, who's playing at his normal, regular, great level, versus a team that's had two goaltenders that have stood on their head for a long period of time, and eventually some team's going to figure it out and find a way to get through them, and they're going to find the holes, and they're going to find the way through. I think the Lightning are probably going to finish that series off in the next little bit. It's been very boring. The first game was a little bit interesting because they were scoring a bunch, but it's been a tough series. I'm very much looking forward to, please let Tampa make it to the next round, because I think at the very least, regardless of who makes it in the West, it'll be a much more interesting series. And with that, any last things? Oh, yes. Just this is not sports stuff, but you know, I think I've dipped a little bit away from the pop culture stuff because the playoffs have been going on. Now that the Canucks are out of the playoffs, I've put a little bit more time into like watching some movies again and getting caught up on you know, some of the series that I've been watching and everything. And we're going to do some Patreon episodes about some of that stuff. Like, I think I'm going to do the Gossip Girl series on Patreon. I'm not going to commit to it for sure, but if people want that, let me know and I will do it. But I'm like, you know, that's on the list of things to do. It's been nice to get a little bit back into watching just some regular TV, something that isn't sports, for a little bit. I ended up watching the new Mulan movie. And I know Disney's not for everybody. I know Disney's a very, like, you know, especially for adults. If you're an adult watching this, maybe you don't want to hear much about Mulan. But I mean, it wasn't really a kid's movie, frankly. I was very fortunate because I didn't pay for it. One of the people I share the account with paid for the movie, so I was initially not going to watch it, and then they're like, "Oh, I paid for it. If you want to check it out," and I'm like, "Oh, cool." So I ended up, you know, sitting down and watching it. As somebody who liked the Disney cartoons and still likes the Disney cartoons, they're very nice to put on when I'm working on stuff because I've watched them 1,000 times when I was a kid before, and sometimes you just want that background noise on, something that you don't have to pay attention to. It was very, very meh. It wasn't very good. Like, here's the thing. I didn't like hate my experience watching the movie. Like, that's the big thing, is I wasn't like, when is this going to end? Or this, like, I wasn't like I wasn't just like seething watching it. But it just, you know, it was like, I enjoyed the experience of watching it, but the movie itself isn't good. Like, it's just not a good movie. I like I appreciate that they took the approach of, you know, if you've watched any of the Disney remakes or the live action movies that they've done, well, live action, there's always a lot of CGI involved with the Disney ones in particular, when they remake their old cartoons. I think one of the big knocks against them has been that, they just remake, it's just the same movie over. It's just the exact same movie over again. On this one, points to them. It was not the same movie. It was a different movie than the Mulan cartoon. However, that's probably why it also wasn't very good, and it's probably because they got rid of the very Disney-ish parts of the movie. They did it for reasons that are like make sense. Like, they wanted to more appropriately discuss, like, do a movie that's more accurately depicting of Chinese culture because than the cartoon. But that also meant there was no Mushu. Eddie Murphy's Mushu is gone, the dragon character. No cricket character. They got rid of all the Disney songs are gone. Like, all the stuff that make a Disney movie were gone. It just was kind of a very generic, it felt more like a generic, a very generic movie that were like a very generic Chinese movie about Chinese culture that, except all the people everyone was talking in English for some reason, right? Like, it didn't feel like it felt like you could just slap any company's logo on it and it would have felt like the exact same movie. And it would have felt like you wouldn't have even batted an eye. You would have thought like, oh, any company would have made this. You wouldn't expect this to be like, this is a Disney movie. Like, it didn't feel like a Disney movie. It was, like, there were they added some cool, interesting stuff in there. They made changes and whatnot, but they also just completely changed aspects of Mulan, specifically like that she has like the best chi or something in the movie, which was basic. Like, somebody on I saw somebody put it best, like, it was like they basically took Mulan and was like, what if she had midi-chlorians from Star Wars? Like, those, she had the midi-chlorians, or like some sort of like the Force magic, which was not the point of the original Mulan. The original Mulan was doesn't matter who you are, what gender you are, or what your history is, you can be a hero sort of thing. And they took that away and were like, she has magical powers. And it didn't make any sense. It wasn't a great movie. If this is the kind of stuff, and then there was, of course, the whole, the woman who played Mulan, said was pro Hong Kong, said some stuff that was pro Hong Kong police, which is, if you know anything about Hong Kong and in the history with China, it's that they're trapped in a authoritarian regime that they're not that they don't have a say in that, even though they don't want to be. And she like on social media posted her support for the Chinese government, which is not good at all. She's for a regime that's not democratic, and it's not good. So there was all that. There's just a bunch of stuff that you could go over. It's I would say if you want to watch it, go ahead. But I would say it's not worth the $30 or something that it would cost you. I was fine. I enjoyed it fine because it was free. But it's not a great Disney movie. I would not even put it up against some of the live action remakes. Maybe this is why you have to remake the Disney movies, because you have to just remake shot for shot of the cartoons, because it might just not work when you try and do something new sometimes, I guess. Hopefully they find a better mix in between the two. It would be better than, watching a straight up exactly the same movie like some of the other ones. And I think with this, we're going to call this an episode. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back with a new episode on Tuesday, or I guess it'll upload Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, you should check out my Patreon, patreon.com/LachInTheCrease. For $3 a month, you get bonus Patreon episodes and advanced looks at articles that I'm writing, including one that's coming out very soon. That'll be up there and in short order. And other perks that are on the way as well. So you should go check out that. Please subscribe on your podcast, on whatever podcast app you use. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make sure to subscribe on the CreaseCast YouTube channel if you want to watch the video versions of these episodes. And make sure to check out my work at my regular writing work at lachinthecrease.com. Yeah, thank you for listening. This has been the CreaseCast, and hope you are all staying safe, all wearing masks, social distancing, or shopping local if you can. And I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.